Now at Lowe's, faster quotes start at the Lowe's Pro Desk. Got a material list handwritten on a sticky note or saved as a photo? Perfect. Bring it to us and get a quote in minutes. And if you don't see what you need on the shelf, we'll help you get it. You can access thousands of products beyond what's available in-store or on Lowes.com, right from the Lowe's Pro Desk. Build quotes faster and source the materials you need to keep your jobs moving. Just like that, at Lowe's.
Hey listeners, this is Peter and welcome back to the History Shorts. Today's episode is brought to you by the Podcast Republic, your ultimate listening app. Discover and subscribe to thousands of podcasts from around the world. Download Podcast Republic today, available on Google Play and the Apple App Store. Today on History Shorts. On the morning of August 19th, 1909, a man named G. Herman Gottlieb left his apartment on East 99th Street in Manhattan with two large empty baskets and what he believed was an excellent business plan. He took the subway north to the Inwood section of Manhattan. He spent the day harvesting wild catnip from a wooded area near Dickman Street. He filled both baskets. He took the subway back downtown to Lenox Avenue and 110th Street, and then he began going door to door on 5th Avenue in East Harlem, attempting to sell fresh catnip to well-to-do families with pampered pet cats. He did not anticipate what happened next. Nobody could have. Our history returns to tackling some myth versus reality and whether medieval people really thought the earth was flat. A quick word from our sponsors.
Hey there, it's Wayfair here, where delivery and setup are as easy as a few taps on your phone. You're relaxing in an old hammock, scrolling Wayfair's app, when you spot it, a brand new patio set. Next thing you know, Wayfair delivers it right to your patio and sets it up. Oh, you need a new grill too? All right, Wayfair's got you covered. With Wayfair's room of choice delivery and fast expert setup on qualifying orders, life gets a little easier. Visit wayfair.com or the Wayfair app.
Wayfair, every style, every home.
This day in history. On June 7, 1494, Spain and Portugal signed the Treaty of Tordesillas, dividing newly discovered lands outside Europe between the two empires and reshaping the future of global colonization. On June 7, 1967, during the Six-Day War, Israeli forces captured the old city of Jerusalem, dramatically altering the political and religious landscape of the Middle East. Story of the day. G. Herman Gottlieb was, by all available evidence, a man of modest means and considerable entrepreneurial spirit. East Harlem in 1909 was a dense, vibrant, polyglot neighborhood, home to Italian, Jewish, and Puerto Rican immigrant communities, packed with tenements, street vendors, and the particular energy of a neighborhood in the process of becoming itself. It was also home to an extraordinary number of cats. Not merely the pampered pet cats of the Fifth Avenue families Gottlieb had come to sell to. No, I'm talking feral cats, stray cats, alley cats of every variety and social standing. Cats whose permanent addresses were, as the New York Herald reported that same day, backyards and areaways. Cats who had never in their lives encountered fresh catnip. Cats who were about to encounter a great deal of it for the first time. The trouble began almost immediately. As Gottlieb made his way along Fifth Avenue, a few catnip leaves fell from the baskets onto the sidewalk. The nearest cats, thin and feral, not the pampered variety he had come to serve, noticed it. They approached, they sniffed, and they began rolling. And then they began following him. More cats emerged from alleys and cellar windows. Rich cats and poor cats, as the Herald put it at the time. Aristocrats from the sofa cushions near the front windows, and the thin plebeians from the areaways struggled mightily to get into his baskets. Within minutes, Gottlieb had acquired a following of somewhere between 30 and 40 cats. They rubbed against his legs. They meowed, they purred. They said, in the words of St. Louis Post-Dispatch, which you could find on newspapers.com, complimentary things about him. Gottlieb tried to shoo them away. The cats were not interested in being shooed. He tried kicking them gently, but they came back. He was, as one newspaper put it, the Pied Piper of East Harlem, except that the children had been replaced by cats, and the cats were not following him away from the neighborhood, but deeper into it. A crowd of human observers had by now gathered to watch. Gottlieb, increasingly alarmed by the feline parade trailing him through the streets of East Harlem, appealed to a passing police officer for assistance. This was his second tactical error of the day. The officer, Sergeant John F. Higgins, surveyed the scene. He asserted the situation, and then he arrested Gottlieb. The charge was disorderly conduct, specifically, the violation of an ordinance prohibiting any person from causing a crowd to collect in a public place. Gottlieb protested. He had not caused a crowd, he had caused cats. Sergeant Higgins was unconvinced by this distinction. He escorted Gottlieb and inevitably the cats to the 39th Police Precinct Station House at 177 179 East 104th Street. At the precinct house, the situation continued to develop in ways that the New York Police Department had not previously encountered. Lieutenant Lasky examined the prisoner and the charge, and he had some reservations. "We can't hold this man," he told Sergeant Higgins. "The law says a man must not cause a crowd of people to collect. The law doesn't say anything about cats." Sergeant Higgins was ready for this. "The law doesn't say anything about people," he replied. "It says a crowd. A crowd of cats is certainly still a crowd." While the lieutenant and the sergeant conducted their philosophical debate about the precise legal definition of a crowd, the cats have followed Gottlieb into the precinct house itself. They were now rolling on the floor, and they were climbing on furniture. They were conducting themselves in a manner of cats who have recently encountered a large quantity of fresh catnip and have decided that all other concerns are secondary. The precinct house had two station cats of their own, actually, Pete and Claude. Claude, the historical record notes, appears to have slept through the entire incident, but Pete did not. Pete, evidently a cat of firm opinions about the territorial rights of station house animals, began fighting the intruding feral cats one by one. He was doing remarkably well when the policemen came to his assistance and drove the last of the catnip addled invaders out into the precinct steps. The legal proceedings against G. Herman Gottlieb were ultimately inconclusive. The lieutenant and the sergeant never resolved their debate about the nature of a crowd to anyone's satisfaction. Gottlieb was eventually released without formal charges. He was driven home in a police patrol wagon. He was followed for several blocks by a small number of cats who had not yet given up on the baskets. The story made the front pages of more than 20 newspapers across the country. The New York Herald, the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, and the Washington Times all covered the incident with enthusiasm that it deserved. Gottlieb himself, upon arriving home, was reportedly approached by a neighbor's cat at his door. He threw it a handful of catnip. "Don't tell your relatives or your friends," he warned, and then he shut the door. The Catnip Riot of 1909 is not by any reasonable measure one of the great events of American history. No empires rose or fell, and no laws were changed. The philosophical question of whether a crowd of cats constitutes a legally cognizable crowd was never actually definitely resolved, which, depending on your perspective, represents either a gap in American jurisprudence or simply good sense. What the story does offer here is something that history occasionally and generously provides: a perfectly constructed moment. A man with two baskets of catnip, a neighborhood of cats with nothing better to do, a police sergeant willing to argue constitutional theory about the definition of a crowd. Hmm. The History Brief. It's one of the most widespread beliefs about history that during the Middle Ages, people thought the earth was flat, and that only later did brave explorers like Christopher Columbus prove otherwise. Well, that's almost entirely a myth. In reality, educated people in medieval Europe generally knew that the earth was round. In fact, the idea of a round Earth goes all the way back to ancient Greece. By the time of Aristotle in the 4th century BCE, scholars were already presenting evidence that the Earth was curved. Aristotle pointed to the shape of Earth's shadow during lunar eclipses and the way that different stars became visible as travelers moved north or south. Then, around 240 BCE, a Greek scholar even calculated the Earth's circumference with surprising accuracy, using shadows, geometry, and simple observation. And importantly, that knowledge did not disappear in the Middle Ages. Medieval universities taught classical astronomy and geography, much of it inherited from Greek and Roman scholarship and preserved through Islamic and Byzantine learning. Medieval maps and texts often depicted the Earth as a sphere, and educated clergy, scholars, and navigators generally accepted that idea. So, you might ask now at this point, where did the flat Earth Middle Ages myth come from? Ironically, much of it emerged in the 19th century, not the medieval period itself. Writers during the Enlightenment and later Victorian era often portrayed the Middle Ages as an age of ignorance and superstition. The Dark Age, standing in contrast to modern scientific progress. The story of Columbus supposedly fighting against flat earth believers became a perfect symbol of enlightened science triumphing over a backward religion. But historically, that's not really what happened. When Columbus proposed sailing west to Asia, most educated critics weren't arguing that he'd fall off the edge of the earth. No, they correctly believed that the earth was round. Their concern was something much more practical. They thought the voyage would be too long to survive. And they were kind of basically right. Columbus dramatically underestimated the size of the Earth and only succeeded because, the Americas existed between Europe and Asia, something that he never expected. So, why does this myth survive? Well, that's also simple. It turns history into a clear story: ignorant past versus enlightened present. But real history is rarely that neat. The Middle Ages were not scientifically perfect, but neither were they intellectually empty. Medieval scholars studied astronomy, mathematics, medicine, philosophy, and theology in surprisingly sophisticated ways. And perhaps the bigger lesson is this: every generation tends to imagine itself as more enlightened than the one before it. And sometimes that's true. Thank you so much for spending some time with me today and helping make this little show such a mighty success. If you're enjoying this show and would like to help with its production, you can always donate a few dollars at buymeacoffee.com or become a Patreon member to enjoy these episodes ad-free. Both links can be found on our website at www.historyshortspodcast.com. Also, don't forget to check out our YouTube channel where we have different videos and series that are not part of this main feed. Have a great rest of your day, and I will talk to you all again tomorrow.